You ever feel like you're just getting your head around your finances and then bang, the rules shift again? It's like the ground is always moving under your feet.
Oh, absolutely. And, sometimes the really impactful changes aren't the big headline grabbers. They're buried in the details, these smaller tweaks that can have, well, pretty big consequences.
That's exactly what we're diving into today. We've got the Gazette Finance Bill 2025 from the Republic of Kenya right here. And we're zoning in on Part 6. That's the section on miscellaneous fees and levies.
Right. Sounds a bit dry, maybe. Miscellaneous fees.
It can sound that way, but honestly, this stuff often gets overlooked and it can tell you so much about where things are headed, economically speaking.
Exactly. Well, everyone's eyes are on, say, income tax rates,
Hmm.
these specific levies and fees. They often hit particular sectors or activities. So our mission today is basically to unpack these, try and figure out what they actually mean for businesses and, well, maybe for you.
Yeah, give you some clarity on these less talked about bits. So look, if you really want to follow along closely, we strongly suggest you download the gazetted Kenya Finance Bill 2025 yourself. We've put a link right there in the description.
Definitely worth doing if you want a full picture.
Okay, let's get started. Part 6. It kicks off with an amendment to Section 9B of the Miscellaneous Fees and Levies Act. What's happening here?
Well, the first thing you notice are a couple of deletions. They seem small, maybe just editorial, but they're interesting.
Oh, like what?
Okay, so first, in the little summary note at the start of Section 9B, the marginal note, they've taken out the words to excess tax refunds.
To excess tax refunds, gone. Okay.
And then a bit further down in subsection B, they've removed the phrase provisions of Section 47 of the...
You're right, just snipped out. So why do these little word changes matter? What could they signal?
Well, in legal texts, wording is everything, isn't it? Removing to excess tax refunds from the description might suggest maybe a broader scope for this section now. Or perhaps they want to handle all tax refunds more uniformly elsewhere, not single out excess ones here specifically regarding fees.
So maybe simplifying or tidying up how refunds are dealt with across different laws?
Could be. It might be about streamlining how this act talks about tax adjustments in general. Removing the specific reference to Section 47 could also point towards maybe consolidating rules or avoiding potential conflicts between different sections. It's subtle, but potentially cleans things up.
Okay, makes sense. A bit of legislative housekeeping, perhaps, but with potential flow-on effects. Let's move to the second schedule, then. This seems more direct, changing things for specific goods. Part A first.
Yes, Part A. So here, paragraph is deleted entirely. That paragraph was about other articles of iron or steel.
Okay, iron and steel out.
And it's replaced by a new paragraph. Eric?
And this new paragraph, it's quite different, isn't it? We're suddenly talking about, what, planes?
Exactly. The new paragraph lists all parts of Chapter 88 and goods of tariff heading 8802.3000 and 8802.400000.
Huh.
Now, Chapter 88 in the customs tariff system, that's basically everything that flies. Aircraft, spacecraft, helicopters, and all their bits and pieces.
Okay.
And those specific tariff codes, 8802.3000 and 8802.4000, they cover helicopters and other powered aircraft heavier than air ones.
So it looks like miscellaneous fees or levies under this act are now explicitly being applied to the aviation sector, specifically these types of aircraft and their parts.
Seems that way. It's a definite shift in focus.
Why now, do you think? Any ideas on what's driving this?
Hard to say for sure without more context, but you could speculate. Maybe it's about generating revenue from a growing sector, or perhaps aligning with international practices for aviation charges. Could even be related to specific infrastructure projects. But the main point is aviation parts are now clearly in the scope here.
Right, a clear signal. Okay, now Part B of that same second schedule looks like a similar move.
It does, yeah. Paragraph 13 is deleted. That one covered things like wire mesh, fencing, reinforcing fabric. Basically woven stuff made of iron or steel.
So more steel products removed from this part.
And replaced again, this time with a new paragraph.
Let me guess. Aviation.
You got it. The new paragraph also brings in all parts of Chapter 88 and goods of tariff heading 8802.00000 and 8802.4000.
Wow, okay, so they're really doubling down, putting these specific aircraft and parts under the miscellaneous fees scope in two different places in this schedule.
It really reinforces the point, doesn't it? The very clear, targeted inclusion of these aviation items.
Definitely something for anyone involved in that sector to note. Okay, let's switch gears to the third schedule. This one deals with the Export and Investment Promotion Levy. Looks like quite a bit of activity here, changes to existing stuff and some new things being added.
Yes, exactly. The third schedule sees adjustments to levy rates for some items already listed, and then, yes, some brand new categories being brought under this levy. Let's look at the rate changes first, particularly for iron and steel.
Okay, what do we got?
First one is semi-finished products of iron or non-alloy steel, specifically low-carbon ones, with a certain rectangular shape. The levy rate on these is dropping
Drafting from what to what?
from 17.5% down to 10%.
Okay, that's a decent drop. And just quickly, what are semi-finished steel products again? Like ingots?
Sort of. Think basic shapes like billets or slabs. They've been initially processed but need more work, like rolling or forging, to become finished goods like beams or sheets. It's an intermediate stage.
Got it. So a lower levy on those. What else?
Similar reductions for bars and rods of iron or non-alloy steel, hot-rolled in irregularly wound coils. There are two categories mentioned based on diameter, basically under 14 millimeter. Both of these also see the levy drop from 17.5% to 10%.
And these bars and rods, that's like rebar for construction.
That's a primary use, yes. Reinforcing concrete, also used in manufacturing for various components. The coils part is just how they're often shipped.
Okay, so across these key steel products, semi-finished and basic bars rods, the levy is being cut quite significantly. What's the likely strategy behind this?
Well, it looks like a move to make Kenyan steel production more competitive, doesn't it? Lowering an export-related levy could encourage more local production, potentially attract investment in steel manufacturing, maybe make exports cheaper, or support downstream industries that use this steel. It feels like part of an industrial strategy.
Trying to give the local steel sector a boost makes sense. But it's not all reductions, is it? There are new things being added to this export and investment promotion levy, and targeting imports this time.
That's right. A whole swath of new items, specifically imported ones, are now subject to this levy. First up, various imported other self-adhesive plates, sheets, film, foil, tape, strip, and other flat shapes of plastics under certain tariff codes.
Self-adhesive plastic, so like sticky tape, labels, plastic wrap.
Pretty much, yeah. Things used in packaging, labeling, maybe some industrial applications. And importantly, this levy doesn't apply if the goods come from within the East African community.
Ah, the EAC exclusion. That's interesting. And the levy rate.
It's 25% or shash,
Yeah.
75 per kilogram, whichever's higher. That whichever's higher part is key.
Yeah.
It sets a minimum charge based on weight, even if the value is low.
Right. So potentially making imports from outside the EAC more expensive, encouraging regional trade or maybe local production.
That seems to be the logic. And we see the same pattern for a bunch of other imported printed materials.
Oh, yeah. Like what?
Okay, there's imported printed polymers of ethylene, vinyl of chloride, polyethylene of terephthalate,
Yeah.
also printed cellular plastics, plus specific types of printed paper and paperboard and gummed paper and paperboard. Again, all these exclude imports from EAC countries.
And the levy on these?
It's even higher on the per kilo basis. 25% are KSHs, 200 per kilogram, whichever is higher.
Wow. K-HOTS. 200 per kilo minimum. That could significantly impact the cost of imported printed packaging, labels, flyers, lots of things, right?
Absolutely. Businesses importing these finished printed materials or materials for printing locally from outside the EAC will likely face higher costs. And you have to wonder if that will eventually be passed on to consumers.
Seems likely. It's a strong signal towards either sourcing within the EAC or developing more local capacity for this kind of printing and material production.
Precisely. And there's one more significant addition.
What's that?
It's on alcohol. Specifically, spirits of undenatured extra-neutral alcohol. Very high-proof alcohol. Over 90% when it's bought by licensed manufacturers of spirits here in Kenya.
So the base alcohol used to make gin, vodka, that sort of thing.
Exactly. That now gets a levy of kush, 500 per liter.
Gosh, 500 per liter. That sounds like it could add a noticeable cost to producing spirits locally.
It certainly seems like it would increase the input costs for local distilleries, yes. Which again raises questions about the final price of those locally produced spirits on the shelf.
Could make imported spirits relatively more attractive or just increase prices overall. Okay.
So quite a mix of changes in that third schedule. Lowering levies on some basic steel inputs while adding potentially significant levies on imported plastics, printed materials, and the base alcohol for spirits.
Right. So let's try and wrap up this deep dive into Part 6, the Miscellaneous Fees and Levies section of the Finance Bill 2025. We've seen, well, those subtle tweaks around tax refund language in Section 9B.
Then the quite clear shift in the second schedule, bringing specific aircraft, helicopters, powered planes, and their parts under the scope of these fees.
And then in the third schedule, a real mix, reducing the export and investment promotion levy on some key iron and steel products, potentially boosting local industry.
while simultaneously introducing new, sometimes quite hefty, levies on imports like certain plastics, printed paper and plastics, and that crucial extra-neutral alcohol for spirit makers.
Mm.
Remember those EAC exclusions, too?
It really highlights how these miscellaneous items aren't minor at all, is it? They can have very targeted impacts across different industries: aviation, construction, manufacturing, printing, beverages.
Absolutely. And their collective weight can influence trade flows, production costs, investment decisions, and ultimately consumer prices. It's not just about the big tax rates.
So it leaves you thinking, doesn't it? How will these specific changes play out? Will the lower steel levies genuinely boost exports? How will industries reliant on those imported plastics and printed materials adapt? What happens to the cost and competitiveness of locally made spirits?
And maybe that's the final thought to leave you with. It really pays to look beyond the headlines, doesn't it? Digging into these details, these miscellaneous fees and levies, gives you a much richer picture of the economic currents and policy directions.
Absolutely. So we encourage you, again, if you're interested, grab the full finance bill, the link's in the description, have a look yourself, see what connections you can draw. It's always worth taking the deep dive.